Late afternoons in Indiana always carried a biting cold, but the chill inside me had started months earlier. I remembered clearly the look in her eyes that night, no longer gentle like the early days of our marriage, but sharp like broken glass. It wasn't because I forgot to take out the trash or missed our anniversary. It was because I was no longer someone she wanted to introduce to her friends. We met back in high school, once the couple who made teachers shake their heads and friends envious. We spent 4 years apart in college but stayed in touch, then reunited at a fall wedding where she wore a cream dress and asked if I wanted to dance. We got married when I was 29 and she was 27. Now I'm 36. 6 years together had once felt like something to be proud of, until the space between two people in the same bed started to stretch like a dark, unlit road at night. Eliza, that's her name, was never the kind of woman who needed pampering or liked flashy things. But lately, what used to make her laugh had started to irritate her. She began spending more time with her new group of friends, women dressed to the nines, driving luxury cars. I knew they were still struggling to pay off. Her page filled up with brunch shots, weekend spa visits, cocktail bars. I once asked, "We're okay with what we have, aren't we?" She shrugged. Being okay doesn't mean it's the best. Those comments became more frequent. At first, they were soft. "Do you think you should try for a higher position?" Then sharper. "You really plan on staying an accountant here forever? Your friends are all directors by now." I heard them, and they lodged in my chest. I never thought that what I brought, a 3-bedroom home in a quiet suburb, 2 old but reliable cars, peaceful nights watching our favorite shows, would be something to look down on. I know I'm not perfect. I'm not good at sweet talk, but I always came home on time, paid every bill on schedule, and never let Eliza carry anything on her own. I thought that was enough. Turns out, I was wrong. Ever since Eliza got closer to Amber, her older sister, things had only gotten worse. Amber always lived differently, loud, showy, and never kept a relationship longer than a summer. Now Eliza started repeating her sister's words. "Our house still looks like it did when we first got married. Nothing's changed." Or, "My friends say we look more like we're just dating than actually married." I couldn't help wondering, was she listening to her own heart or to the voices of people who didn't understand our life? One evening, while I was struggling to fix a jammed drawer, Eliza walked in, looked at me, and said coldly, "Timothy, I don't want to live my whole life settling like this." I looked at her, my hands still greasy from the old hinge, my throat tightening. Settling? That was the word that kept me up for the next 3 nights, because I always thought I was building a home, not running a temporary stop. Maybe I had overlooked too many signs. The silent dinners, the messages she hid when I walked in, the hugs that no longer held any warmth. But it wasn't until she started mocking my career in front of others that I realized something had broken. The scariest part wasn't the breaking. It was that she no longer cared to gather the pieces. February in Northwest Indiana is when the weather can turn on you anytime. Snow falls without warning, wind slices through you, and the roads become a maze of white. But in that brutal cold, I held on to a plan that probably seemed foolish. Surprise Eliza on her birthday. This year, her birthday landed on a Friday, but Eliza had said she wanted to spend the weekend in Lansing, where her sister Amber lived. She planned on going to a spa, having dinner with friends, while I, the one too busy to leave the office, would stay home. That's what she thought. The truth was, I had requested time off 2 weeks earlier. I had booked a table at a French restaurant by the lake in Michigan, a place she had always dreamed of visiting just once. I called her favorite bakery in Fort Wayne and ordered the lemon strawberry mousse cake she loved. I even packed the pastel pink dress she once said, "Wearing this to dinner with you would make me feel like a princess." Everything was ready until the Thursday evening weather report issued an emergency alert. 10 inches of snow expected along the entire route from our home in Merrillville to Lansing. Temperatures dropped below zero and visibility would be dangerously low. My friends texted, "Cancel it, Timothy. Driving in this storm is insane." But I had made up my mind. I couldn't back down, not when this might be the last chance to hold on to something between us. Not to prove I was the perfect husband. Just, I needed to know if Eliza still wanted me in her life. when I wasn't speaking with words, but with action. I hit the road at 6 a.m. Snow was already falling, each flake sticking to the windshield like scattered salt. It was just over 300 miles, but my car crawled along like a turtle. It took me 3 hours just to get out of Lake County. The GPS kept rerouting me as road closures popped up due to ice. I had to stop 3 times and force bitter coffee down just to stay awake. By noon, the sky turned slate gray. I didn't see a single car headed in my direction. Just tire tracks half buried in snow and trees bending under the weight of the wind. At one point I wondered, if I turned around now, would Eliza be disappointed or would she feel relieved? By 4 p.m. I made it to Lansing. I remembered Amber's neighborhood well. Old houses, white fences, slanted roofs, blanketed in ice. I parked 2 blocks away since a tow truck was clearing an accident up ahead. My shoes weren't made for snow that deep, nearly knee-high, but I pushed forward step by step, hugging the cake box with frozen hands, breathing through the burn of cold slicing into bone. By the time I reached the house, the lights were already on. Through the kitchen window, I saw Eliza laughing with Amber and a few friends. Soft music played. I gripped the doorknob, ready to walk in with the cake and a birthday wish, but stopped cold when I heard her voice drift out, laughing after a joke I'll never forget. Wonder if Tim's stuck at the office all night, or sitting somewhere cuddling that precious Excel of his. Amber laughed loudly. If I were him, I'd cry getting ditched like this on my birthday. Eliza shrugged, raised her wineglass, and said, "Better than him being here, killing the vibe." I froze on the snowy porch, the cake box trembling in my hands. The cold no longer numbed me. It was that voice. The voice of the woman I married. Now mocking me as if I were nothing but an inconvenience. I don't remember exactly how I turned away, but I remember the feeling of my soaked shoes pressing into the snow, leaving shaky tracks behind. I didn't head to the car right away. I walked under the falling snow, holding a birthday cake that would never be given, looking for somewhere, anywhere, without laughter. Without that voice, just to breathe. I stopped at the end of the block where a lawn lay buried under white. The wind sliced at my neck, but the sting inside was sharper. I still held on to the cake, the lid sagging under the weight of the snow. I stood there for a long time, Eliza's words echoing through my mind, killing the vibe if he's here. It wasn't the first time she'd made cutting remarks, but this was different. She wasn't speaking to me, she was speaking about me in front of others, with the same casual tone one would use to share a joke. Suddenly I remembered all the times she called me dull, said I was just numbers and bills. I always thought it was playful teasing between spouses, but now I realized it had never been a joke. I turned and faced Amber's house. For a second, part of me wanted to walk in, hand over the cake and say happy birthday, pretend I hadn't heard anything, pretend everything was still fine. But then I heard another voice, a friend of hers, dripping with sarcasm. "Eliza, be careful. If he finds out how much fun you're having, he might quit and start delivering cakes full-time." Laughter erupted. Then Eliza joined in, replying coolly, "As long as he's not driving tonight, weather like this, one wrong move and I'm filling out that insurance claim." The clink of glasses that followed left me dizzy. No one else there knew what I did. Just 2 weeks earlier, we had renewed our life insurance policy. I was the insured. The policy was for $500,000. In that moment, I no longer felt cold, only hollow, as if someone had drained every drop of blood from my body and left behind an empty shell. Eliza, the woman who once held my hand the night my father passed away, who cried when I had a high fever last year, was now laughing about the possibility of me dying in an accident. I placed the cake box on the step beside a fake plant covered in snow. I didn't knock, I didn't text, I didn't leave a note. I just wanted to disappear from there as fast as possible. The walk back to my car was barely 200 yards, but I moved like a sleepwalker. Every step pressed heavier on my tightening chest. I opened the car door and sat in the driver's seat, but I couldn't turn the key. My hands were shaking too much. I turned on the heater, let the hot air blow straight at my face, but it didn't warm me at all. My phone buzzed nonstop. I glanced at the screen, 3 missed calls from Eliza. One message from Amber. Timothy, did I just see you outside the door? I didn't reply. Didn't open any other messages. I shut off my phone and disconnected from the world. I found a motel a few blocks away, the kind people only stop at when they have no other choice. The room smelled of mildew and cigarette smoke, with thick, scratchy curtains and a heater that clanked every time it kicked on. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every laugh, every word, like a broken tape stuck on repeat. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay there, eyes wide open, clutching the blanket, questions swirling with no answers. How long had she felt this way? Was this really the first time she said something so cruel, or just the first time I heard it? By morning, I turned my phone back on. 60 messages, 27 missed calls. The last message from Eliza had just 3 words. Where are you? I didn't reply. I just texted my best friend, Mason, that I needed a place to stay for a few days. He sent back only one sentence. Doors never locked. Come in. I drove home, the roads draped in snow like a funeral veil. When I arrived, I didn't go in right away. I just stood on the porch, staring at the house I had built with everything I had, brick by brick, that now felt as empty as I did. Eliza wasn't there. She was still in Lansing. I went straight to the bedroom, pulled out a suitcase, and began packing, not in anger, in absolute silence. I brought essentials, documents, laptop, a few clothes. The rest I left behind like a message that needed no words. As I stepped out to the car, I didn't look back. Snowflakes drifted gently onto the hood, masking the cracks that had long been there, ones I hadn't wanted to see. Mason's living room was just like the last time I'd been there. A worn-out couch with a cigarette burn, a faded Pearl Jam poster on the wall, and a messy bookshelf with a few unopened beers. But I wasn't there for football or a weekend hangout. I was there because I had nowhere else to go. Mason didn't ask questions. He simply opened the door, handed me a key, and said, "Stay as long as you need." I nodded. I didn't have the energy for words. I dropped onto the couch, leaned back, closed my eyes. I hadn't slept in nearly 2 days, but the exhaustion now wasn't just physical. It had become something deeper, slower, harder to name. I turned off my phone after sending my boss one message: family emergency, need a few days off, will work remotely if urgent. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't want to hear from anyone, especially not Eliza. That afternoon, when I turned my laptop on to check my bank account, I saw 3 new transactions on the joint credit card, all at luxury clothing stores. The total came to nearly $1,600. I quietly clicked to close the account. The next day, I went to the bank and asked to transfer half of our savings into a new account under my name. The banker asked if there was an issue. I simply said, "Separation. Need things clear." She didn't ask anything else. I also called the credit card company to freeze the joint card. While on hold, I saw a recurring payment from a streaming service I didn't even use. I logged in, signed out of all devices, changed the password, and blocked all unfamiliar IP addresses. Every action was precise, without hesitation. When emotions are no longer a safe place to lean on, reason takes over the rest. On the second night at Mason's, I turned my phone back on out of curiosity. 63 messages, 47 missed calls. Most were from Eliza, a few from Amber, some from mutual friends. I didn't read them all, but the previews on the lock screen were enough to tell me tension was rising. "Timothy, I don't understand what's happening. Please, call me, please. You're driving me crazy, just answer. If you don't respond within 24 hours, I'm calling the police." I shut the phone off. I needed her to live in uncertainty, to sit alone in that quiet house and wonder what just happened. The same way I sat frozen behind the wheel, asking how the person I loved most could wish for me to crash, just to cash in a life insurance policy. The next morning, I logged into my work email and submitted a formal request to work remotely for 2 weeks due to an urgent family matter. My manager, Roger, was a practical man. His reply was just one sentence: "Family first, projects later. Let me know if you need anything." I appreciated him for that. At lunch, Mason came home with a bag of fast food and 2 beers. He sat beside me, didn't say a word, just handed me one. When I popped it open, the hiss made me flinch. probably because too many thoughts were piling up inside, ready to erupt. Mason didn't pry. He knew me well enough to understand. If I wasn't talking yet, I wasn't ready. On the fourth day, I got an email from the bank. Some charges on the old credit card had been flagged as suspicious and declined. I knew Eliza had tried to use it. Maybe she thought I was just angry and would be back soon. She didn't know I'd already begun separating our finances, firmly and without negotiation. That night, I opened a new document on my laptop, titled Post-Breakup Plan. Not for any particular reason, just to write out everything I needed to deal with. House, contracts, assets, insurance, passwords, social media, mutual friends. Each line I completed made my chest feel a little lighter. Not because I was running away, but because I was finally taking back control of my life. I still hadn't told Eliza why I had vanished. Hadn't said what I heard at Amber's house. But I knew that by staying silent, she would figure it out. She was smart. She could read the spaces between words. And my silence was the clearest verdict I could give. On the fifth day, while Mason was at work, I made myself a cup of coffee and played an old Norah Jones track. Music Eliza used to call sad as fog, but to me it matched how I felt. Quiet, heavy, but honest. I sat at Mason's kitchen table, stirring a coffee that had gone cold, eyes staring at my laptop screen without reading a single word. Work documents were open, spreadsheets waiting for numbers, but I couldn't focus. That sentence kept echoing in my mind, like a nighttime echo. As long as he's not driving tonight, weather like this, one wrong move and I'm filing an insurance claim. It wasn't the content that chilled me, it was the way Eliza said it, calm, detached, like talking about the weather. And then came the laughter, stabbing deeper than any insult I'd ever heard. I never told Mason. Even though he was my best friend, the one who had known me since college, I couldn't bring myself to say it out loud. Not because I was ashamed, but because I wasn't ready to hear it repeated. Once had already broken me. Saying it again, even from my own lips, would only make the wound rot further. By day, I pretended to be fine. I answered work emails, nodded when Mason asked about dinner, turned on the TV, though I had no idea what I was watching. But at night, everything came into focus. Mason's living room would go dark except for the glow of a table lamp. I lay on the couch, not sleeping, not crying, just drifting in a sea of endless thoughts. I used to think Eliza was just under pressure, just tired of a life that wasn't flashy, not exciting enough like her new friends. I convinced myself that if I just worked a little harder, made more money, she would return to the woman I once knew. The one who sat cross-legged beside me in our one-bedroom apartment, eating ramen and saying, "We don't need anything else, just each other." Now I'm not sure that woman ever really existed, or if she was just a beautiful memory I made up to hold our marriage together. I replayed the audio on my phone. It was a short file, just a few dozen seconds, recorded when I accidentally left the voice memo app on while driving to Lansing. In it, Eliza's voice came through crystal clear. Every word was distinct and unmistakable. I didn't know why I still kept it, but I couldn't bring myself to delete it either. Each time I listened, it felt like there were two people inside me arguing. One said I should forgive her, that everyone says dumb things when they're drunk. The other was colder, telling me not to be a fool, that a wife who truly loves her husband would never say something like that, not even in anger or as a joke. I started reviewing our entire journey like auditing an old file, combing through memories to find the signs I had missed before. There was a moment 2 years ago when Eliza said, after a party, "If you ever win the lottery and die right away, at least I wouldn't have to split the assets." Back then, I just gave an awkward laugh, thinking it was a joke. Now, looking back, I see how naive I was. Some things, when seen in isolation, seem harmless, but when you string them together, the picture changes entirely. The times Eliza refused to come with me to visit my mom, the unexplained cash withdrawals, the laughs that didn't reach her eyes. They all now felt like distress signals from someone I no longer recognized. One night, I opened Facebook and scrolled through Eliza's profile. Her recent posts were all about spa days, dinners, glasses of red wine, with captions like, "A woman should always choose herself first," or "Sometimes leaving is its own form of love." Not a single sign she was grieving, regretting, or even looking for me. Everything looked glamorous, except for one missing detail: me. I wasn't angry seeing those things. The strongest feeling was emptiness. I couldn't pinpoint when it happened, but I started to believe I had spent the last 5 years loving a version of Eliza that no longer existed, or worse, never did. I met Eliza again on a Tuesday afternoon at a small cafe in the suburbs of Valparaiso. She chose a seat in the far corner, her back to the window, sunlight casting a faint shadow across her latte. I walked in, without rushing. Everything in me felt cold, like the February wind outside. She stood as soon as she saw me, instinctively. Her makeup was light, but it couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes. I sat down without shaking hands or small talk, just a nod and silence. "Eliza, I'll ask this once," I began, my voice steady and calm. "Do you remember what you said on your birthday at Amber's house?" She looked up, worry shimmering in her eyes. "You? You heard it?" "Every word," I replied. Eliza immediately shook her head, gripping the cup handle. "Timothy, I didn't mean it. I had some wine. I was joking around with Amber." "So you think joking about your husband crashing a car is reasonable?" I leaned in. "Or did you just think I'd never hear it, so it didn't matter?" She stayed quiet for a few seconds. I watched her throat move as she swallowed something bitter. Then Eliza looked up and whispered, "You misunderstood. I didn't mean that. What I said was, I wished you didn't have to work that day so you could stay home and relax with me." I exhaled, unlocked my phone, and pulled up the recording I'd listened to dozens of times over the past 3 weeks. As I pressed play, I didn't take my eyes off her face. "As long as he's not driving today, with this snow, if he crashes into a pole, I'll have to go file an insurance claim." Then laughter, crisp and chilling. Amber chimed in. "Well, at least you'd get a few months of silence." And they both burst out laughing. I paused the audio as Eliza lowered her face into her hands, covering her mouth. She cried, no longer trying to stay composed. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Timothy. I didn't think you'd hear. I didn't think." I sat back in my chair, no longer angry, just numb and exhausted. "I don't care whether you thought I'd hear it or not," I said. "What matters is that you thought it was acceptable to say, that you could say something like that about the man who's shared your bed for 6 years and not think twice." Eliza reached out to touch me, but I pulled my hand away. "Timothy, I was wrong. I swear I didn't mean it. I was overwhelmed, stressed from work, Amber always pushing. Don't," I interrupted. "Don't blame anyone else. That was your voice. Those words came from your mouth." The space between us grew thick. The sound of a spoon stirring coffee at a nearby table rang sharply in the silence. Eliza choked out, "Give me a chance. I'll change, I'll go to therapy, I'll cut off contact with Amber if I have to. We can get through this, can't we?" I looked at the woman who used to mean everything to me, now curled up like a child caught in a lie. I felt pity, but no longer love. "Eliza," I said slowly, "I didn't come here to make up. I came to close this chapter." Her face went pale. I pulled an envelope from my coat pocket and slid it across the table. "Separation agreement. I've already signed it. You can pass it along to your lawyer if needed. I've moved my things, closed our joint accounts, stopped all charges on our old cards. Everything from now on will be handled in writing." She opened the envelope, lips pressed tightly. I stood, grabbed my coat, and left her with one final line. "I once believed we'd grow old together, but what you said that night woke me up from that dream." I walked out of the cafe. The wind slapped my face, but it didn't sting as much as Eliza's final look before I turned away. I don't know how long she stayed there. I don't need to. The only thing I knew for sure was this. From that moment, I had walked away from a marriage where the other person had already checked out long ago. They just hadn't said it out loud yet. 2 weeks after our final meeting, a large envelope arrived at Mason's house. The sender was Eliza. I recognized the handwriting on the address line, but there were no little hearts or silly symbols next to my name like she used to add. I placed it on the table, planning to leave it there for a few days. But that night, after dinner with Mason and a few unnecessary beers, I found myself opening the envelope as if my hands were acting independently from my brain. Inside was a thick stack of paper and a small black USB drive clipped to the top. The letter was 10 pages long, handwritten. Each stroke looked oddly careful. Eliza started from the beginning, not skipping any detail. The work pressure she never talked about, the jealousy toward her group of friends, the lost sense of direction when she saw me content with our stable life. I confused safety with boredom, she wrote. I thought you never changed, so you weren't trying, but it turns out I was the one who couldn't see. She wrote about watching her friends upgrade cars, buy designer bags, and then looking at her own closet feeling inadequate. That envy, she admitted, corroded everything good we had. She didn't make excuses or blame anyone, she just repeated one line again and again. I'm sorry for making you feel like you weren't enough. I couldn't read it all in one go. I had to stop several times, not because I was overwhelmed, but because of a growing, unfamiliar feeling inside me. The sense that maybe, just maybe, Eliza really was changing. The USB included 3 audio files, each about 45 minutes long. In them, it was her voice, steady, occasionally breaking, as she spoke with a female therapist named Claire. I only got through part of the first session, just enough to know Eliza wasn't doing this for show. She didn't know I'd ever hear it. She didn't mention my name or frame me as the source of all her issues. She was just honest with herself, a version of Eliza I had longed to meet. The following week, I got a message from Jill, one of the few mutual friends who stayed in touch with both of us. Jill said Eliza had quit her PR job and was now working part-time at a local bookstore. She says she wants a simpler life, Jill wrote. I don't know why, but it seems real. I didn't respond, but I started paying more attention. On social media, Eliza no longer posted glamorous photos. Instead, there were pictures of her standing at financial literacy sessions for young women, or handwritten notes with headlines like, "Independence isn't being rich, it's knowing what's enough, so you don't have to borrow." The last post that made me freeze in front of the screen was a photo of her and a group of women laughing together after a workshop. The caption simply read, "Learning to love yourself without hurting others." I didn't know whether to call it remorse or a personal journey she had finally begun on her own. But clearly, Eliza was stepping into a new chapter, one no longer centered around me. 3 weeks after the handwritten letter, I received another envelope, this time from an attorney. It was an updated separation agreement with one clear addition. Eliza declined financial support. She only requested a fair arrangement regarding the house and shared assets, with no additional demands. I read through it. Nothing in the document felt manipulative. She wasn't trying to hold on through money or memories. She was showing she had the strength to let go. Strangely, that gave me a sense of relief. That night, I stepped out onto the porch where Mason had hung soft yellow lights and placed 2 wooden chairs. I sat there, a crisp breeze brushing my face, listening to the occasional cars pass on our quiet street. I thought about how Eliza used to say she hated wind. Maybe now she had learned to live with it, just as I was learning to accept that sometimes, to hold on to something, you have to let it go first. The new apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old red brick building, about a 10-minute drive from town. There wasn't anything special about it. 1 bedroom, scratched hardwood floors, a small kitchen barely big enough for 2 people. But for me, it was a true refuge. No memories, no familiar objects, no Eliza. I moved in on a misty morning. Mason helped carry boxes in his silver pickup, the one I used to call too bulky for small-town life. Now it felt like a lifeline. We didn't talk much during the move, just heavy breaths, lifting boxes, a few flat jokes about the recliner being too big for the spiral stairs. When everything was inside, Mason stood at the door, gave me a pat on the back, then said, "Take your time. You don't need to have it all figured out in the first week." I thanked him with a look, then closed the door. The apartment was uncomfortably quiet. I opened my laptop, started a new file, and titled it, "Should I Go Back?" I split the page in 2 columns, stay on one side, end it on the other. Under each, I started listing points like a financial risk assessment. Pros. Eliza had changed. She was living responsibly. She was standing on her own, no longer overspending. She had apologized, not just with words, but actions. She wasn't begging or forcing anything, just quietly correcting herself. Cons. I no longer trusted her. The crack ran deep, that comment, and the laughter after, still lodged in my heart like a splinter that wouldn't work itself out. She had belittled me in front of others. She once treated my presence as an inconvenience. I paused mid-sentence under "end it." Was I mourning the image of an Eliza that once existed, or someone who never really did? That question haunted me for nights. I still remembered the tiny details, stubborn as dust in memory. The way she tilted her head when she smelled fresh coffee, her off-key lip syncing in the shower, the mix of perfume and new book scent when she came home with stacks of novels. They were all still in my head, as vivid as our first date. I didn't love the Eliza from last month, the one from that birthday. But I still wasn't sure if I'd stopped loving the Eliza from 5 years ago. The one who once touched my heart with a gentleness and intelligence few others possessed. Each night I lay on the new bed, sheets still smelling faintly of plastic wrap, trying to picture the future. One path had me walking alone, clearing debris and rebuilding from scratch. The other was a return journey, but along a trail paved with sharp pebbles of doubt, bitterness, and fragility. I didn't know which was right. I just knew that if I didn't choose, I'd stay trapped in this half-life. No fresh start, no closure. On the weekend, I strolled around the new neighborhood. There was a small park 5 minutes from my place, where kids rode bikes along the sidewalk and old folks read newspapers under elm trees. The vibe here was nothing like the old neighborhood with Eliza. No party music on Saturday nights, no revving sports cars at midnight, just peace, and a slower rhythm that made it easier to breathe. I began setting up my space the way I wanted. Gone were the items Eliza had once picked out. I bought a small oak table and placed it by the window, where morning light streamed in just right for reading. I hung a single family photo, the only one I'd kept after leaving the old house. Every small action felt like drawing a boundary. Between me and Eliza. Between the past and whatever was beginning. Sometimes, I still dreamed. One night, I saw us cooking dinner together in our old kitchen, chatting about nothing. Another time, I came home to find her laughing with someone else, then turning to look at me like I was a stranger. I'd wake up, heart pounding, unsure which dream hurt more. I hadn't filed for divorce. I hadn't seen her again since that last cafe meeting. But time wasn't infinite. A decision had to be made. Not for Eliza, not for Mason or anyone else, but because I didn't want to live in limbo. In a space where everything existed as under consideration, with no beginning, no end. I received an email from Eliza on a Wednesday afternoon, the subject line simple: "One last meeting, if you're willing." Inside were just 3 lines. She invited me to meet at a small cafe near Central Park, 3 p.m. Friday. No long explanations, no begging, no emojis or familiar ellipses, just a quiet invitation. Strange, but somewhat respectful. It took me a full day to reply. "I'll be there." Just as brief. But as I hit send, I'd opened a door I wasn't sure I wanted to walk through. That cafe had been our weekend spot in the early days of our marriage. Table 3 by the window, left corner, where Eliza used to read her favorite book while I handled urgent emails. I had forgotten that detail until I walked in and saw her sitting in the exact same spot. Eliza wore a simple gray sweater, her hair tied neatly at the nape, no makeup. On the table sat a cup of espresso and 2 envelopes stacked together. One white, the other pale yellow. She nodded as I approached, not saying a word until I took the seat across from her. "I won't take long," she began. "I just want to lay out every possibility so we both have a choice." She slid both envelopes toward me. "The white one is if you want a divorce. Everything split based on actual value. I won't ask for anything else. I'll buy out the house share on my own, no financial support needed. We divide the assets according to our contribution, no lawsuits, no dragging each other to court." I gently opened the white envelope, finding a proposal typed with care, complete with notes from a lawyer. Clean, professional, no trace of emotion. "Eliza." She raised a hand slightly to interrupt, then pointed at the yellow one. "That's if you want to try again. 6 months of couples therapy. We don't move back in together right away. One monthly check-in session to reflect on how we feel. Total financial transparency. If it doesn't work out after 6 months, we go back to the white envelope. I sat in silence for a long time. Outside the window, the sky was shifting to gray, a sign of late-season snow. I felt like I was sitting between two paths, one a clean ending, the other a slippery slope with no guaranteed stop. Eliza, I said slowly, I won't deny that you've changed. I can see that. But I'm also not sure if we're still a match for each other. She nodded, showing no disappointment. I understand. That's why I'm not asking for anything. I just want you to have the right to choose, without guilt or pity pressuring you. I picked up both envelopes, my hands still slightly shaking. How many times had I sat in front of contracts, analyzing risk, weighing benefits? But never had it been this hard, because this time a signature could mean closing a chapter I once thought would never end. I need time, I said, more honestly than ever before. I know, Eliza replied, her voice soft like breath. Live your life, and if one day you know what you want, I'll listen, no matter what that is. I stood up without touching her, without making promises. I just walked out of the cafe with the two envelopes in hand, stepping into the March wind that had just begun to chill. Inside, I no longer felt anger or regret, only a kind of quiet I couldn't quite name. That night, I placed both envelopes on my desk. I didn't open them again, didn't look at what was inside. I just sat down, pen in hand, and wrote one question on a fresh sheet of paper. Am I still brave enough to forgive without forgetting? I didn't have the answer, but at least I was no longer afraid to ask the question. Eliza's birthday this year fell on a Friday. Snow drifted gently outside my apartment window, thin and even, as if the sky was trying to keep everything still. I had no plans to call, no flowers, no emails, not even a text. But around 4 p.m., I found myself standing in front of the little bakery on Chestnut Street, the one where it all began. The shop wasn't crowded. I picked out a lemon strawberry mousse cake identical to the one I'd carried through the snowstorm last year. The baker wrapped it carefully in a white box and tied a red ribbon on top. I didn't explain why I was buying it, just left a quiet thank you and walked away. Back home, I placed the cake on the kitchen table by the window, where the afternoon light filtered through the sheer curtain. I took out my phone and snapped one picture. The cake, alone. Soft golden light spreading across its smooth surface. No words, no emojis. I sent it to Eliza via text. Message sent. I set the phone face down on the table and went to make myself a cup of hot tea. 10 minutes later, the phone buzzed. It was Eliza. I stared at the glowing screen in silence. The fourth ring in, I hit decline, not out of anger or pain, just because I didn't want to hear anything until I had clarity in my own heart. Half an hour later, she sent a voice message. Her voice came slow and hoarse, like someone who had cried but was now steady again. Thank you for the picture. I understand what it means, not to reconnect, not to erase everything, just to say, we both survived, even if in different ways. She paused, then continued, I don't expect you to come back. I just hope you know I cherish what we once had. I'm sorry, not to be forgiven, but to help you let go with less weight. I sat in the living room, tea cooling in my hands. Outside, the snow still fell, but lighter now, like memories settling gently on rooftops. Not enough to block the roads, but not disappearing either. I didn't cry. I didn't hurt. I just felt light. A kind of lightness that didn't come from winning or shedding, but from standing between two choices and realizing I didn't need to rush either one. I reopened Eliza's handwritten letter, not to reread it line by line, but to look at it as a milestone. I folded it carefully, tucked it into a drawer alongside my personal papers. I didn't tear it up, didn't burn it, didn't keep it by my pillow either. This new life wasn't loud like I once imagined. I jogged by the lake in the early mornings, cooked dinner in the evenings, read books, chatted with Mason when he stopped by. I learned to fix a leaky faucet myself, learned to live in a small apartment without the familiar footsteps in the hallway. Some nights I missed Eliza, but not in a yearning way, just a harmless kind of remembering, like when you walk past an old street and see your favorite restaurant closed, a quiet for lease sign in its place. You don't look twice. You just register that it was once part of your life. I don't know what will happen after 6 months of separation. Maybe we'll sit across from each other at a law office, sign divorce papers, and wish each other peace. Or maybe we'll have another coffee, look at each other without resentment, and admit we both tried. And now it's time to let go. But either way, I've changed. I'm no longer the man who silently swallowed everything just to keep a roof over us. I no longer trade my self-worth for an old promise. I no longer try to be loved the way someone else wants, but instead, I'm learning to love myself the way I deserve. Timothy's story is a powerful reminder that love can't last without respect. He once sacrificed, stayed quiet, forgave, until his own dignity was dismissed. When he walked away, he didn't carry hate, only a clear understanding that self-worth doesn't lie in someone else's approval. Timothy didn't seek revenge or cling to the past. He chose to rise, live kindly, and let time answer what the heart once feared to face. Do you think Timothy should forgive or move on? Does Eliza truly deserve a second chance? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel so you don't miss the next powerful, emotional stories about family and life.